I was born under red lights and whispered promises, not in a hospital, not even at home, but behind the velvet curtain of a stage no child should ever know. My name is Evelyn Mae Johnson, and I'm 74 years old now. I live in a quiet house in upstate New York, where the grass grows tall in the summer and the birds seem to sing just for me. But when I close my eyes, I don't see the trees or the garden I planted with my grandkids. I see feathers, lace, and the soft glow of footlights. I never told this story before. Not to my daughter, not even to my husband. But lately, I've been feeling the weight of silence, and I think it's time. I don't know who my father was. Mama used to say he was a man just passing through, like a train that never stopped at the station. She never said his name. Not once. And I never dared to ask. We lived in a building that looked like any other on the outside. Cracked bricks, metal fire escape, a flickering street lamp that buzzed all night. But inside, it was another world. The front looked like a laundromat, always dark, always locked. But go through the hallway, past the door with the gold handle, and you'd find the stage. Burlesque, they called it. But to me, it was just home. While other kids played hopscotch or rode bicycles, I learned to walk between fishnets and makeup, kits. I knew how to balance on a wooden box backstage, how to tie a corset, and how to find lipstick shades by name. Mama was the star. They called her Delilah Blaze. She wore red sequins and sang songs that made men sigh and women whisper. She danced like she had fire in her bones. And when she came off stage, sweat on her brow and a smile that never quite reached her eyes, she'd take me in her arms and say, "My little dove, my secret treasure." She told everyone I was her niece, that her sister had passed, and that she took me in out of pity. But every woman backstage knew the truth. They just didn't talk about it. That was the rule. We don't talk about what happens when the curtains close. Sometimes at night I'd sneak onto the stage when no one was there. I'd stand in the spotlight and imagine what it felt like to be her, to have all that power, to be seen, to be loved. But even as a child I sensed it. There was something about Mama's eyes, something hollow, something haunted. I remember one night, I was about 6, when I heard her crying through the wall. Not soft tears, but the kind that shake your whole body. I pressed my hand against the plaster and whispered, "I'm here, Mama." But she never answered. I started school late. Mama didn't want people asking questions. When I finally went, I lied, constantly. I said my mother was a seamstress, that we lived above a tailoring shop, that I loved books and baking. But the truth was, I didn't know how to read recipes, only cue cards. The kids noticed I was different. My shoes weren't like theirs. My clothes had glitter that didn't wash out. I didn't know how to talk about cartoons or homework. And one day, a boy named Peter asked if my mama was a dancer. I froze. He said his daddy had seen her once, said she wore nothing but sparkle. I ran home that day and locked myself in the back room, crying into a feather boa. And for the first time, I wished I had a different mother. But Mama, she tried. She really did. On my 7th birthday, she made me a cake with her own hands, burned the bottom, but smiled like it was perfect. She gave me a necklace, a tiny dove in silver. "Because no matter what happens out there," she whispered, "you'll always be my freedom." I didn't understand it then. Not fully. But that necklace would carry more meaning than I could have imagined. Na sua voz envelhecida, doce e cansada, Evelyn respira fundo e diz, That was the year everything changed. The year I stopped being just her secret and became her shadow. I remember it was late autumn when the first real crack appeared. The nights had gotten colder, and the wind howled through the broken window panes. The velvet curtains at the club smelled damp. The sequins lost their shine. It was as if the magic itself had started to fade, and with it, Mama's spirit. One evening after the show, Mama sat me down on the threadbare couch backstage. Her makeup was still on, but it was smeared, like she hadn't even bothered to wipe away the tears before painting herself new. She held my face in her hands and said, "Baby, I need you to be strong now. Things are gonna change." I didn't understand. I thought maybe we were moving. Maybe to a real house, with a swing in the yard and a picket fence like I'd seen in storybooks. I was wrong. That week, a man started showing up. Not like the usual customers who stayed in the shadows, drunk and laughing. No, this man walked with authority. He wore a black coat, and under it, the glint of a badge flashed now and then. He was a police officer, and Mama. She became someone else around him. Quieter, smaller. Sometimes I'd peek from behind the curtain and see them arguing in the alleyway, their breath turning to mist in the cold air. I couldn't hear all the words, but one phrase cut through the night. "You owe more than you can ever pay." A few days later, the rules changed. I wasn't allowed backstage anymore during shows. Mama locked the doors from the inside, and when I knocked, she wouldn't answer. I spent those nights curled up behind the laundromat door, listening to the muted thump of the music through the walls. I didn't know it then, but Mama had made a deal to keep the club open, a deal that cost her more than just money. One night I woke up to shouting, not the usual drunk voices. These were deeper, meaner. I cracked the backstage door just a sliver and saw Mama arguing with two men I didn't recognize. One of them grabbed her arm so hard she dropped her purse and everything inside scattered across the floor. Lipstick, coins, a crumpled photo I had never seen before. It was a picture of her. And a baby. Me. Written on the back, in smeared ink. Keep her safe. The next morning, the club was closed. No shows, no music. The velvet curtains ripped down, the lights smashed. And Mama packed our life into 2 battered suitcases and said, "We're leaving, Dove. We're going somewhere they can't find us." I asked where. She just kissed my forehead and said, "Somewhere with no stages, no lights, just sky." I held on to her tightly, my little hands clutching the silver dove necklace she had given me. At that moment, I believed her. I believed we could escape. But life doesn't let go of secrets that easily. We boarded a bus headed south, sitting way in the back. Mama kept glancing over her shoulder, flinching at every stop. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Like all the sparkle had been stripped away, leaving just a tired woman in a faded coat. I laid my head against her and listened to the steady thump of her heart. I thought it was the sound of safety. I didn't realize it was the sound of goodbye. In her voice, trembling but steady, Evelyn says, "That bus ride was the last time I ever saw my mother dance. Not on a stage, not under the lights, but in the way she tried to protect me. She fought the whole world, and she lost." We arrived in a town so small it barely had a name. One dusty main street. A diner with cracked vinyl booths. A church with a steeple that leaned just a little to the left. No clubs, no theaters. No place for someone like Mama. We rented a room above a bakery, and for the first time, Mama took a regular job. Serving coffee to farmers who barely looked her way. She wore plain dresses now, tied her hair in a tight bun. She scrubbed the paint from her nails and hid the sparkle in her voice. But some things you can't hide. Not really. Even when she tried to be invisible, people noticed. The way she walked, too proud. the way she smiled, too sad. And when they noticed, they whispered. At school, it didn't take long for the whispers to catch up to me. The teacher, Mrs. Cunningham, was kind at first, but after the other parents started murmuring, she looked at me differently, like I carried something dirty on my skin that might rub off on the others. At recess, no one picked me for games. At lunch, no one sat beside me. I became a ghost in a classroom full of living children. One day, I came home and found Mama sitting at the kitchen table staring at an unopened envelope. It was a letter from the county. She was being called to court. I didn't understand all the words at the time, but I caught a few. Unfit, endangerment, custody. Somebody, maybe someone from the diner, maybe a neighbor, had reported us. They didn't want someone like her raising a child. Mama didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just folded the letter slowly, placed it under a cracked sugar bowl, and lit a cigarette with shaking hands. That night, she tucked me into bed and whispered, "If they come, you stay quiet. You don't say a word, Evelyn May. Promise me." I promised, because what else could I do? But promises, like secrets, are heavy for a child to carry, especially when the world decides to crack them open. It was a Sunday morning when the knock came. 3 sharp raps at the door. Mama didn't answer at first. She just stood there, frozen, like a bird in the path of a hawk. But the knocking came again, harder this time. I peeked around the corner and saw 2 men in suits, not the officer from the club, different ones, cold eyes, clean hands. "Miss Johnson," one of them called. "We're here for the girl." Mama clutched the necklace around my neck so hard, I thought the chain would break. "No," she said, her voice low and fierce. "You're not taking her." They handed her a piece of paper. I didn't know it then, but it was a court order. They had already decided, already judged her. Mama dropped the paper to the floor and knelt down to me, her hands trembling as she framed my face. "Be brave, my dove," she whispered. "Don't let them make you forget who you are." The men pulled me away, and I screamed, kicked, begged. But Mama didn't fight. She just stood there, silent and proud as they dragged me down the stairs. That was the last image I had of her. For many years, standing tall in the doorway, her eyes burning with a love so fierce it broke something inside me forever. In her voice, thick with unshed tears, Evelyn says, "They thought they were saving me. They thought they were giving me a better life, but they didn't understand. She was my whole world. After they took me, life became a series of strange beds and colder kitchens. I was placed in foster care, shuffled between families who looked at me like I was something broken, something to be handled with gloves and wary glances. No one ever asked where I came from. No one wanted to know. I stopped talking about Mama, stopped mentioning the velvet curtains, the smell of powder and sequins, the way she used to hum old torch songs while combing my hair. Each time I spoke about her, I saw the same look, the flinch, the whispered pity, the judgment. So I buried her deeper inside me, like a secret only I was allowed to keep alive. One family I stayed with, the Harrisons, made me scrub floors and eat alone in the kitchen. They said it would build character. But what it built was a hollow space inside me, a space where trust used to live. At night, I'd clutch the silver dove necklace, the only thing they hadn't taken from me, and whisper Mama's lullabies under my breath. Little dove, stay brave, stay strong." I didn't cry much. Tears, I learned, didn't change anything. School was worse. The other kids had parents who came to plays, brought cupcakes for birthdays, hung up crooked macaroni art on the fridge. I had court dates, social workers who smelled like coffee and exhaustion. I learned to smile without meaning it, to nod without listening, to survive without being seen. And yet, even in the loneliest moments, I carried her words. Don't forget who you are. When I turned 16, I aged out of the system. No cake, no party. Just a slip of paper that said I was free to go. Free to go where? I packed what little I owned, a pair of jeans, a threadbare sweater, and the necklace, and caught a bus going anywhere. For a while I cleaned motel rooms, waitressed in diners where no one cared about my past, lived in apartments so small that the walls felt like they could crush me in my sleep. But I was free. And sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the window, look at the stars, and imagine Mama somewhere under the same sky, thinking of me too. Then one day, fate, or maybe something deeper, whispered in my ear. I was cleaning out the attic of a cheap boarding house, sorting through boxes left behind by tenants long gone, when I found it. An old flyer. Delilah Blaze, the Queen of Velvet Dreams. There she was, my mother, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years, arms outstretched, feathers swirling around her like a storm of light. It felt like a slap, and a hug, and a wound ripped open, all at once. I clutched the flyer to my chest and sank to the floor, shaking. The world had tried to erase her, had tried to make me forget. But there she was, in ink, in memory, in blood. And I realized something, right there on that dusty floor. I wasn't done. Our story wasn't over. I was my mother's daughter, and I would find her, no matter what it took. In her voice, low but burning with new fire, Evelyn says, I had spent my whole life running from a past they told me to be ashamed of. But that night, I decided I wouldn't run anymore. I would walk straight into it. I didn't have much to go on. Just a name that wasn't real, Delilah Blaze, and a face I hadn't seen in over a decade. But determination does something strange to you. It fills your lungs with stubbornness. It makes impossible things seem almost inevitable. I started small. Libraries, city records, dusty old playbills tucked into the corners of forgotten archives. Most people thought burlesque was something shameful, something to be hidden. But to me, every faded poster and crumpled news clipping was a love letter from my mother. Months passed. I worked mornings at a greasy diner, evenings cleaning motel rooms, nights researching. I learned that Mama had stayed under the radar after losing me. No new stage names, no more clubs. She had disappeared, vanished into the folds of America like a note slipped under a door. But then, one day, a woman at a senior center mentioned a Miss Ellie, who used to sing at small county fairs decades ago. Said she had a voice like smoke and honey, and sadness that wrapped around you like winter fog. Ellie, Evelyn, Delilah. Mama had been hiding in plain sight, stitching a new life together from scraps and hope. The lead took me to a small town 2 states over. A town with peeling paint and old brick sidewalks. A town where secrets could grow roots. I found her at the edge of town, living in a cottage covered in ivy. When she opened the door for a moment, I thought I had found a ghost. Her hair was gray now, her face carved with lines of sorrow and strength. But the moment our eyes met, there was no doubt. It was her, my mother. She gasped, covered her mouth with trembling hands. The silver dove around my neck caught the light. She saw it, recognized it. Tears welled up in her eyes and she whispered, "My little dove." I wanted to be angry, to ask why she didn't fight harder, why she let them take me. But when I saw the way her hands shook, the way her whole body sagged under invisible weights, I understood. She had never stopped fighting. She had just lost too much to keep standing. We sat together on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruises and gold. She told me everything. How she had tried to get me back. How the courts had slammed doors in her face. How, after years of fighting shadows, she gave up. Not on me, but on the system that never cared for girls like us. How every night she sang lullabies to the stars, hoping some part of me could hear. I laid my head on her shoulder, just like I did when I was a child backstage, and whispered, I never forgot who I was. She kissed the top of my head and said, Neither did I, my dove. Neither did I. In her voice, soft and strong, Evelyn concludes, We spent the years we had left weaving a new story. A story not built on shame, but on survival. And when I look at my daughter and my granddaughter, I see not the scandal they once tried to pin on us. I see strength. I see hope. My name is Evelyn Mae Johnson. I was born behind velvet curtains, and I carry my mother's fire in every step I take. If this story touched your heart, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, my dear, and stay a little longer. Another true story is already waiting for you on the screen. See you there.